Hello, Bugs. Welcome to today's Hearthstone video. We're going to be going over the top 5 decks as of December 2023. We're about halfway through as of the date of the recording. It's a little past midway, and with the holidays coming up, I don't know how many of you, I guess, will, depending on, have the time to, say, grind to Legends. So I best 5 decks of the meta right now to do that with. If you wanted to push, I guess, either quickly or at least with decks with high win rate, and we'll go over that. So at number 5 here, which honestly, for this percentage of win rate, the fact it's only number 5 is kind of crazy. I think it kind of is a starting point to show you that the balance of the game right now maybe isn't the best. It's not the worst we've ever seen. We've seen some worse, but we'll get into that maybe in a little bit. We have the Highlander Hunter, and I mean, this is honestly about as straightforward as the Hunter usually gets. I mean, we do see some cards in here like Neptulon I don't see in here super crazy often, but I think that's mainly in here because of the Thunderbringer. But you basically just play really heavy in all stages, mid, early, and then late game bombs. Lord Thamar to double, you get your King Crushes bumped up, Faithful Companion, things like that. Now, to be fair, this is different from the Hunter decks that at least I've seen in recent memory. This is probably more akin to the big Beast Hunter that we would have seen about a year or so ago, year and a half ago, I think. But it's one of the only, actually, I think it's the only 40-card deck in this top 5, which is kind of surprising because for a little while it did feel like Renathal and Reno decks were top king again. But if you do have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. This really is Highlander for Reno, which is always really good, and the Thaldarin, the Lost, which is Battlecry. If you have no duplicates, gain immune this turn and attack all enemies. That includes your opponent's face. So if you have ways to hand buff this, which there really isn't any or many in the deck, but you can double it, which makes it a 6 attack bomb, which of course then you can wait to double it, and then you play that down, and it not only can hit face for 6, like a 4-mana fireball, but it gives you a 6/8, since I believe it doubles everything, just making sure. Yeah, so it becomes a 6/8 that effectively clears the board and everything for 4 mana if you get it done in that order. And of course, you just have so many good cards in the deck, and it's just really powerful. It's, again, very similar to the big Beast Hunter. I'll try not to go on too much more just because the deck is pretty straightforward, but it's tempo heavy. It's just like the big Beast Hunter from before. You effectively control the board all the way through the game, and then eventually, if you have to, you have these late game bomb finishers to just punch your opponent in the face unless they have ways to, out control you. But generally speaking, that's really hard to do in this deck, and that's the strength. It just always has threats every turn. Your opponent can't ever get ahead on board unless they're like an OTK deck. They don't really stand much of a chance, and if they are, usually with all this early game stuff, you have ways to beat them before they get the OTK off. And yeah, this deck is really quite good. And again, the only XL deck in the top 5 right now, and I don't know if that's good or not. I guess we'll let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And deck number 4 here, we have Enrage Warrior with a 54.77, so pretty close win rate, almost 55 to the Hunter deck we saw. And this is pretty near the polar opposite, I would say. Yes, there's a couple big cards in here, but really you want to put a lot of pressure early. The number 1 card, where is it? For this deck, Imbued Axe. And you get some few minions out, you control the board, have some few damage minions, you play Imbued Axe, which of itself, being a 2/3, isn't that bad of a weapon. But let's say you even have 2 damage minions on your board, you attack with the weapon first, all of a sudden you also get basically +4/+4 in charge if they're already on the board in minions. And then you just have enough charge and things like that, even with Trial by Fire, keep the board clean up for your cheaper minions to constantly go face. And then the tip of the iceberg, really, is you have the Anima Extractors, who can buff these cheaper minions, sure, but really one of the main points is to get your Decimator Olga or your Grommash or Remornia buffed up to maybe even, say, 10 attack or something, which isn't that hard in a deck like this. Your opponent finally decides, or finally gets the ability to come back and clear your board, and then you just smack them in the face for 10 with charge, basically. Rush turns into a weapon. Olgra's Battlecry effectively does the same thing. And it's just sort of a finisher. So it's super aggressive early board control with its like AoE sort of whirlwind style things, and then you punch them in the face really hard at the end if you have to. Sometimes it doesn't get that far. A deck, again, I've never really tried too much myself, so let me know if you'd like to see me give it a go. It's definitely one of the higher skill cap decks in the game. I've played against people playing it, and it doesn't go well. So if you know what you're doing, it's a powerful deck. And if you make a misplay, though, it can cause you to lose. So maybe not the easiest to climb with, but definitely one of the most powerful. Now, to start our conversation, to really get into the conversation here about if the balance is in a great spot right now, Earthen Paladin sitting at a 56.08%. So again, that's already pretty high when you think about it. A lot of times we may see the odd deck above 55%, or at least that's usually what I see. But we have three over 55%. And I will spoil it right here, right now. They're all Paladin decks. And I think that is a sign of an issue. Basically saying you can play any Paladin deck right now and probably get to Legend pretty easily. Obviously, you're going to have some back and forth. If you run into, I think all the Paladin decks are relatively weak against Blood Death Knight, like the Reno Blood Death Knight. So, I mean, maybe that's the way you could counter it if you have that deck and want to play it. But really, this version is the Earthen Paladin, my favorite version of Paladin. It's just all about controlling the board, going early. You play Showdown. Main reason you play Showdown, which is in 2 of these 3 decks, is to say, oh, we're going to get the upside of getting 3/3/3s, but then it also makes our Prismatic Beam cheap. So we just eliminate our opponent's 3/3s, and if your opponent already had a couple minions on board, this becomes 0 mana, and it's basically like a 2 mana, wipe your opponent's board, and summon yourself 3/3/3s. Pretty strong. And then, of course, you just have the Earthens that scale off of each other. But with that, I guess I'll kind of just show you here. We have Aggro Paladin at 57.18, which, I mean, this is probably the, for lack of, I'm not one for using the word, most basic of the Paladin decks. Really, it's just all about getting out cheap minions, usually with Divine Shield, using Boogie Down to do the same thing, or Muster for Battle, and then a lot of buffs that you then just use to smack your opponent in the face, Crusader's Aura, etc. And really, Showdown Paladin, I think, is quite similar. Yeah, it plays a few different cards in here, but generally the idea is the same, except you also play things like Prismatic Beam, the Showdown, and then Sea Giant. So Showdown Paladin basically takes the Earthen Paladin portion out of the Earthen deck, adds in some of the aggro cards, and sort of mixes the best of both worlds. So as you can see, we have 3 Paladin decks, all over 55% win rate, mostly with the same cards. So obviously we could say those cards are potentially the issue. It's even hard to say what that issue would be, because, I mean, Paladin kind of seems to be one of those decks where it must be hard to balance. I've said this before. I find they're either at like the top of the list or at the bottom. If they were to nerf, say, a card in this deck or 2 or something like that. I know they did Order the Court, but that didn't really impact it very much. It just seems to fall out completely. So we do have things like Astral Serpent here, which just helps them draw. I've never tried this deck. Because it's the top, I may give it a go and see how it works, just so we can show the channel and myself if it's easy to run or not. But yeah, if you want to climb to Legend right now, I don't imagine, or I don't know if they're going to do any patches before Christmas. I do know the mini set will probably be releasing in January, more than likely, so there may not be any patches until then, which, if that's the case, this deck just may be the one to go with. I know this was pretty short, and I don't usually, I try to have as much fun in the game as possible. I will say you'll see that I may give this deck a try, but as of today, when I was trying to record some gameplay, this is all I'll say: 8 Paladins in a row. Yes, they were slightly different. Obviously, as I mentioned, there's a couple different versions here, but as someone who's had that issue before with Death Knight, which made me step away from Hearthstone for a little bit, I'm a bit worried that if they go, say, a full month, with Paladin being, every other game you play against, let's say even generously, I don't see if that's going to go well, I guess, for some people. So let me know what your thoughts are. Is it good for the game? I think the difference between the top deck and the bottom deck right now, or class even, is almost 20% win rate difference, which is not good. I know that you can never have perfect balance. It never works that way. But we've had metas where top to bottom has been within 10%, and then the bulk of the classes had at least one or a couple decks that were over 50% win rate. And we're just not seeing that right now. I do believe this actually comes from the fact that they nerfed some of the cards that hurt Paladin and against them from other decks, and that just allowed Paladin to jump up. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and I'll see you in the next one.